Alright, and welcome to the Spanish Villa movie poster tutorial. And this is not an actual real movie or anything like that. This is just something that I've made up. And it's not the full size of an actual one sheet. This is more along the size of a DVD cover, DVD movie cover. And a lot of the techniques that we're going to be doing during this video are what they really use on movie covers. Like with the masking, the color blending, the fonts, the type, all those things. Okay? And we're just going to create this one type of concept where it looks like we have a team of people, and it's a very commonly used, and a lot of times you see this where the faces are really close together and they just all blend in, and it sort of looks like this. And it's, creating some type of visual communication. Now, I don't have any special training in visual communication or anything like that. That is something that needs to be learned, that I would actually go to school for, to learn how to do it right, if that's something, or if this is something that you would like to do or pursue for a career or something like that. But I'm going to show you some Photoshop techniques that you can use so you can create your own movie covers that look just like this. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, before we begin, I want to go over some of the images that we will be using for this tutorial. Now, the first image that we have right here is an image of a lake. We have a nice sky in the air, and then we have some trees, and we're going to be using this image for part of the background for the movie cover. And then we have a picture of these old buildings on the side of this cliff here, which looks kind of cool, and we're going to use that in the bottom of the movie poster. Then we have the finished movie poster right here. And then we have these pictures of the people that will be included into the poster. Please keep in mind, though, we're going to be working with a movie cover that has a very dark background. It's not black, but it's dark. And so the images that you would like to use for your movie cover, if they don't have a dark background, then you're going to need to crop these images or mask the background or remove the background out of the people so you can place them over the darker background. However, if you do have photos that already have a dark background, such as this one over here, then you can just use the paintbrush and mask around the photo, and you don't necessarily have to mask that before you bring it into the project. You can do it while you're in the project. But I've already went ahead and masked all these people right here, so you don't have to. And so let's go ahead and start this tutorial. I'm going to go right over to Photoshop right now, and let's come up here to File, New, and let's create the new image that we'll be using for this movie poster. Now, we're not going to actually make it a real movie poster size, okay? This is just, it'll be too large, and we're going to make this much smaller, so it's just a lot easier to work with, and it's just a smaller file anyway. But we're going to go with something around 1168 pixels wide by 1700 pixels tall, and a resolution of 300. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. And here it is. Okay, so the very first step, what we're going to do is fill this background in with black. So just over on the toolbar, let's select the paint bucket tool, and with black as the foreground, just go ahead and click on the image to fill that in with black. Alright, to begin, we're going to start on the background. We're going to totally lay out the background of this movie poster. So let's go over to the Adobe Bridge. And we're going to open up this first image that you see right here of the lake and the trees and the sky. And we're going to use this for the background. So just go ahead and double click on it. And let's bring that into Photoshop. And then I'll select the Move tool on the toolbar. I'll just click on this photo and drag it over to the new, or to our new movie poster image right here. And then I'll just position this around like so. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to completely fill the image, but I'm just going to move this around. I'll zoom out here a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and just leave that right about there. That looks good. Now, we won't be using the color in this image, so let's just come up here to Image, Adjustments, and just select Desaturate, which is right here, to remove all the color, okay? And then we can come over here and just close this out. We no longer need this. And let's just give this layer a name. So I can just put Lake. Or better yet, we'll just make this Clouds. because the lake part of this photo will not be featured in the poster. So we're going to call this clouds. Let's go back into the Adobe Bridge, and I want you to open up this next image right here. I'll go ahead and double click on it, and we have these buildings. The rustic buildings are on the side of this cliff, and looks like they're about to fall off, but you know. I'm going to go ahead and just select the Move tool, click and drag over, and drag this one over to the project image as well, just like this. And I'll position this down. Now we're going to actually see this building here in this image. We want to see it anyway, but so we're going to have to resize it so we can see most of the building, just so we get the entire building. It's not, I'm sure it's more than one building. It's not one building, but it's probably a bunch of houses and stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and move this down, and I want to leave this area down here for the credit block. All the credits are going to go on the bottom of the movie poster, so I'm going to have that, move that up a little bit. And I will go ahead and press the Enter key on the keyboard to confirm that transformation. There we go. Doesn't look very exciting? No worries. Because what we're going to do is desaturate this layer as well, because we really don't need the color. We're going to create our own color and our own drama for this poster. Let's go right up here to Image, Adjustments, and desaturate this layer as well. So let's just, whoops, I'm going to go ahead and double click on this layer, and we're going to call it Buildings. All right, looking good. Now let's go ahead and zoom into the image here. Well, I will, just real quick, because I'm going to remove the sky behind these buildings here, and we're going to replace that sky with this sky that we have on the clouds layer. All right, and welcome to the movie poster number 2 video. And in this tutorial, we are going to create the movie poster that you see on the screen right now. Now, this is not a real movie or anything like that. This is just all fictitious names. But I wanted to sort of use some of the same techniques that they really use on movie posters, so it would just be a little bit more fun. Now, originally, I was just going to have this tutorial on how to show how to make these light beams coming out of the house, and this was just going to be a separate tutorial on the DVD, but I decided to go ahead and create this big movie poster project all together so we can do all these different types of masking techniques and just make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more fun. I'm going to go over to the file browser or the Adobe Bridge, and let's take a look at the images that we will be using for this tutorial. And you can see this is the image of the forest that is on the movie poster. And you can see the forest image is way up here at the very top. And I wanted to create this like deep in the forest type feel. And so I placed the forest way up here at the very top, and then I have the house way down here, so it just has that more of a spooky deep in the forest type look to it. And so anyway, we have this image of the eye, and we also have the house. Now the house is in broad daylight. It's just lunchtime or it's noontime, and I'm going to show you how to take this old house during the broad daylight and turn it into nighttime. And we're going to have these light beams shooting out of the house, and if you look closely, you can see that they are reflecting off the grass down here. And this is really high resolution, so I can zoom in real close here and show you this. So basically just going from day to night. And if you're wondering how I went full screen, I just click on this little button right here, full screen mode, or you can press the F key on the keyboard and that'll go into full screen mode. And you can actually toggle back and forth between all the screen modes by pressing the F key. So let's go ahead and move on with this project. So to start the project, come up here to File and go to New. And for the width, I want you to enter in 2816 and the height 4200. And then resolution 300 dpi because we're going to be working with some high resolution images. Now, for those of you that would like to create a standard movie poster size or change the settings here so it's a real movie poster size, which they normally call a one sheet, then the dimensions for that would be 27 by 41. So most of the movie posters that we see all over the place are usually this size right here, or created at, most of them are created at this size. And so if you're looking to go the full real scale of the movie poster, then go ahead and enter that number in, 2741. But you know, for this tutorial, I don't want to quite go that large, because I think that if once you understand the techniques on how we do some of the effects in this tutorial, then you can go ahead and just make the movie poster any size you want. So for me, we're just going to go with 2816 by 4200, and I just rounded it off the best I could. You can just make that 2815 if you want. 300 dpi for the resolution. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now the first thing we're going to do is make a black background. I'm going to select the paint bucket tool, change the foreground color to black. I'm going to press the D key on the keyboard, and I'm going to go ahead and just click and color that background in. Let's go ahead and double click on that background layer to unlock that, and I'm just going to name it background once more, because if I don't, it'll name it layer 1, so we don't want that. We want to have that named as the background. Next, we'll need to bring in some of the images that we will be using for this movie poster. Let's go over to the Adobe Bridge, and let's look over here and see what we have. Well, we have the poster, the eye, and we also have the house. Well, let's go ahead and start with the forest here. So let's go ahead and double click on that, bring that into Photoshop, then select the Move tool, click on this stock image here, click and drag it over to the movie poster project file. And now let's position this towards the top. And what I think we'll do here is just resize this down a little bit. Now, this image here is also taken during the day, but we want this poster to be nice and spooky, so we're going to go ahead and just make everything that's daytime nighttime. I'm going to press the Enter key on the keyboard, and we're going to confirm that. So in order to go from daytime to nighttime, let's create an image adjustment. And before I do that, though, I'm just going to name this Forest. Then I'm going to hold down the Alt key, which is the Option key on the Mac, and I'm going to come down to the bottom of the Layers palette right here, click right here on this little circle icon while you hold down that key, and just select Levels. And then put a little check in this checkbox right here. Bring the mouse pointer right over to this middle gray slider right here, and that will allow you to adjust the midtones of this photo. So just come over here and just move this gray slider to the right. And that'll look like it almost takes it from daytime to nighttime, just like that. You don't have to go too far. We're just going to add a little bit for now, but that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and click OK. So let's create a layer mask. Come down to the bottom of the Layers palette, click this button right here, Add Layer Mask. And you should see a little white window right next to the thumbnail there. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here so we can see what's going on. So after you've created that layer mask, come right over to the toolbar, and I want you to select the brush tool. And then for the foreground color, let's just go ahead and change that to black by pressing D and X on the keyboard. That will change that to black real quick. Then over on the image, let's increase the master diameter of this brush by just right-clicking on the image and turn that up pretty high. Now the hardness, we don't want any hardness at all, so just keep that at 0. This looks pretty good. And let's make sure that that layer mask there is activated. And I want you to come over to the image. Let me zoom in real quick. And we're going to paint on this layer mask. And what that'll do is darken the very bottom of this, just like this. See, because we don't really want the grass in with this whole thing, because we want to just see the trees. We want to create that illusion like the trees are this tall. And this is like the trees start down at the bottom and then they're just so tall, and now this is the very top of the trees up here. I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in. So I'm darkening the bottom of this photo here. So we've completed that part. Now we're going to go ahead and do a lot of color overlays to make all the color blend in. Because if you look over on the completed poster, you can see that the color is quite different than it is from the one that we're working on. Well, that's okay, because all that is a photo filter that I'm going to show you how to create later on. So let's go back to this image, and now we're going to go on to the house. So let's go back into the Adobe Bridge, and then just over here where the house is. Now, in order to find a lot of these images, you may need to browse by thumbnail. I would recommend using the file browser or the Adobe Bridge, because the names of the files are, they have different numbers, and so they're a little bit harder to find. And I need to include the numbers on all these photos so I can keep track of, who the photographer is, where the photo came from, and all those sorts of things. So, okay, so we have it opened up in Photoshop now. Before we drag the house image over to the poster, though, I want you to come back over to the project image here, and I want to make sure that the topmost layer is selected. That's because as soon as we drag the house image over to the poster image, it's going to place it on a layer above the layer that is selected. Watch. I'll just come over here and select the Move tool. I'll click and drag this over, and as soon as I see that little symbol, that little plus symbol, I'm going to go ahead and just release the mouse, and now it's over on this image, and you can see it places it just above the levels, an image adjustment that we just used a minute ago. I'm going to double click on this layer, and we're going to call it House. And let's move the house down, the image here, a little bit. All right, now for the next step, what we're going to do is completely remove the sky behind this house, the sky and the mountain, because this is going to allow us to just remove all that daytime stuff, and we're going to make it nighttime. I'm going to go ahead and zoom into the image here. Now, we don't have to be very, very neat when we're doing this, because this is going to be a pretty dark image, and we might not be able to see all our mistakes. And so, I'm going to grab the pen tool here and just make a quick path around this house. And I can do this fairly quickly because we do have a lot of straight edges. It makes it a lot easier. And I'm pressing the space bar on the keyboard to get the hand tool so I can navigate around while I use the pen tool. And there, I'm just going to get to the very edge of this roof here. Might even just do that over again. Down the house right about here. And we're also going to go straight across this land, this field. I'll click at this side of the image. Then I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit. I can just come outside right here and click around and then reconnect it right here. You see that? Boom. And that'll make it a complete path. So then all I have to do is just right click in this path, make it a selection right here, and just 0 for radius, and put a check mark right in this box for the anti-aliased, and then go ahead and click OK. And you will see that become a selection. What we're going to do is create a layer mask. So just over here on the Layers palette, click right here on the Add Layer Mask button, and that'll make the background go away. But I'm going to show you a really cool technique that you're just going to love, and you're probably going to use it on all your projects now, I'll bet you. Every time we cut something out or we crop things in Photoshop, sometimes we don't quite get all the way around the edges, or we don't get close enough, and we don't have to get really close. We can always fudge it from now on. You know why? Because I'm going to show you a little trick, and you can use this if you have a layer mask on the same layer, okay? So make sure that layer mask is selected. It should be by default after you've created the new layer mask. And I want you to come up here to Filter, down here to Other, and I want you to select Minimum right here. And this is the fun part. All we're going to do is increase the radius of this minimum filter, and that will get rid of the outline around the house. Now, what's happening here is that the minimum filter is making that mask a lot smaller. And so while it's doing this, though, we get the benefit, because instead of going in there with a selection and contracting the selection by 2 pixels, and versus selection, press delete, we don't have to do any of that anymore. Just come into the minimum filter on that mask and set the radius here, to either 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 pixels, depending on how much outline you have around your cutout, and you can make it go away, just like this. I'll just put 4, and we're going to go ahead and click OK, and let's zoom out of the image here. That's looking great. And you can see this is what it was before, and now this is after. I'm going to just come over here, and we want to get back some of the background here behind the house. So I'm going to come over to Image Adjustments and Brightness and Contrast and see if I can brighten this channel, or I'm sorry, this mask a little bit. Let me go ahead and back up a little bit because I think I moved just a little bit too fast. In order to get that background to come back just a little bit, because you don't want to completely eliminate the background behind this house, we want to bring just a little bit back. Click on the house mask, come over here to Image Adjustments and over here to Brightness and Contrast, and you can brighten a mask. Yes, you can. Believe it or not. But you can come in here and just turn up the brightness, and you'll slowly see that come back. You see that? So we can start to see the background again. That's pretty cool, because we don't want to completely eliminate that, but we just wanted to make it a lot darker than the front of the house will be. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now what we're going to do is take this house from daytime to nighttime. So let's go over here on the Layers palette. I want you to hold down the Control key on the keyboard. That's the Command key on the Mac, and I want you to re-click on this layer mask, and you'll see the house load there. Then I want you to create another adjustment layer. Let's hold down Alt, click on the new adjustment layer icon right here, and I'll select Levels. Put a check in this box right here, click OK. And we're going to do the same thing that we did with the sky with the house. All we have to do is just come down here to the bottom of the Levels control and just click on this white slider and move that to the left. And now basically you're just making the sun go down. Now you can go all the way down, but that's pretty dark. But we're going to move it to just about right here. That looks pretty good. Let's click OK and check it out. Let's go ahead and start on the light beams. And those are what you see right here. Because it's dark outside and there's a big, huge, bright light inside. Really, this is supposed to be a sci-fi type thing. It could be an extraterrestrial spaceship inside the house or something like that, or a science project is what it's supposed to be. And it's just so bright, it's the beams, you can see the beams of light just shooting out of the windows. And you can see the reflection on the grass. And I'm totally, like, you can tell, I'm just totally into this, like all the drama type stuff that you can do in Photoshop. And if we don't have a photo of something like this, well, we can always just create it in Photoshop. And that's what's so great about this program. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to select the zoom tool, and we're going to zoom just a little bit closer to this house. So I'm going to make a new layer, and we're going to call this Windows. And then I'm going to go ahead and just make the layer adjustment invisible for the house for now. And that way we can see the windows here. Okay. All we have to do over here on the toolbar, let's select that polygonal lasso, and I'm just going to make selections right where the windows are. And I don't even think this old house really has any windows, but we're going to go ahead and create some. After you've created one selection, you can add another selection by just holding down the Shift key on the keyboard. And I'm getting this little arrow next to that should go away in just a second. There we go. So yeah, if you hold down Shift, you can make another selection while retaining the other selection that you've created, or the first selection. So I'm going to come down here, and let's just select these windows. There we go. And I have one more to do. Down here, over here, and up. Okay, great. Now all we have to do is fill these selections in with the color that we're going to use for the light that's inside the house. Now this color is pretty easy to make because all it is just yellow. I found that yellow is just creates the best result for this. Let's come over here to the toolbar, click on the foreground. I want you to select yellow right here on the color picker. And after you've adjusted this to yellow, if you want to make sure you have the correct yellow, just click on Only Web Safe Colors, and then that'll give you less colors to work with. And if you click on yellow right here, you'll see it'll be on the very top right here. Okay? And then go ahead and click OK. And then just come over here. Well, before I do that, I think I'll make sure I have the Windows layer activated first. And then I'll come over here to Edit, down here to Fill, and then I'll just select the foreground color to fill with from the contents, use foreground color, and then I'll click OK. And there you go. I'll come up here to Select and Deselect. And let's go ahead and zoom out here. And then what I'll do is make this image adjustment layer here that's above the house. I'll turn that on, and there you go. So we can see that we have these really bright lights inside the house, and what we need to do now is create the light beams. And let's go ahead and get started with that. So the first thing, let's go ahead and make a new layer, and we can call this, let's go ahead and call this beams. Now to create the beams, it's really not very difficult to do because all we use is the polygonal lasso. Okay? And so all I have to do is just come in here, and I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can see what's going on. There we go. And I'm going to start on this first. Well, I'll start on this one over here, this last one. And I'm going to want to position that polygonal right there on the corner of the last window, the very top left corner. Click, then I'll just drag out. And we want to sort of imagine this beam, how beams just almost like when they shoot out of a window, they widen a little bit. It seems like that anyway, but click and then drag it out and kind of go up a little bit, just at an angle, just slightly like this. And then click and then drag down, click again, and then just return back to the window, but this time I want you to return back to the lower left corner, right here. Then up, and then reconnect the selection, just like that. Okay, cool. Now let's fill that selection in with the beam color that we're going to use. And the beam color is also very easy to pick out. Come over to the foreground color, click on that, bring up the color picker. Then with the color picker, I'm going to select the Only Web Safe Colors. That way, again, we just have less colors to work with. And I want you to bring this slider down here to the orange color. You see that? We're switching from yellow to orange. And guess what? You've already got the color. So after you see that, go ahead and click OK. Then over here on the toolbar, we'll select the paint bucket, and then I'll just click inside that selection to fill that in. Select, deselect. Now to get an idea on how this is going to look, let's just come over to the beams layer and lower the opacity just a little bit. And now we can sort of get an idea on what it's going to look like when the light is just shining out of the windows. And I can just readjust this beam if I need to, just to line it up to that window just a little bit better. And so let's go ahead and create another beam. And I think what I'm going to do is just rename this layer here to beam 1, because we're going to create 3 beams of light. I'll create a new layer, and let's call this beam 2. I'll select the polygonal lasso tool, and we're just going to click on top of this one and bring out. Now I'm going to make this go up, or well really I'm just going to make this basically go in the same direction as the other beam, but it'll be a little bit higher just because this window is a little bit closer to us. So in that case, I'm going to make it a little bit wider, just a little bit taller, and then I'll return back to the bottom left corner of that window. I'm going to click and then right up to the top, and then over here on the toolbar, let's select the paint bucket and fill that in. And I'll just select that. And now let's turn down the opacity of that. Now we're not really sure exactly what the opacities are going to be for these beams just yet. I'm just playing around here. It's just so you can kind of get an idea on the progress that we're doing. Let's create another new layer. I'll double click, and we're going to call that beam 3. And now for beam 3, let's select the polygonal lasso here. I'm going to click at the very top of this window and just go up here at an angle and down. And this is just going to be the widest beam so far. And I'll click at the bottom left corner of this window and move that up and connect the selection. There we go. I'll select the paint bucket and let's go ahead and fill that in. Deselect and lower the opacity. And it looks like I'll just move that beam in just a little bit closer to the window. There we go. Perfect. And so I'll lower that opacity just a little bit more. Okay. Now there's a few things that are missing here, and we're going to go ahead and do those in just a moment. But before I move on, I'm going to show you something really cool. You may or may not have tried this already or even knew about it, but I'm going to go ahead and include it on the video. I'm going to combine these 3 beam layers together in their own separate group. Then what I'm going to do is apply a layer mask to the group. Let me go ahead and show you. If you're using an older version of Photoshop, if you're not using CS2 and you're using an earlier version, what I want you to do is link all these layers together. So in Photoshop CS and earlier, you have the link well that's just next to the little eyeball icon. I want you to add the beam 2 and beam 1 layer here together, so you have beam 3, beam 2, and beam 1 all linked together. Now for those of you that are in Photoshop CS2, just hold down the Shift key, make sure beam 3 is selected, hold down the Shift key, and then click on beam 1, and that'll select all 3 of those layers. Then I want you to come over to the very top. We're going to go into the layers options, so come up to the little arrow at the very top right of the layers palette right here, and I want you to come down here to new group from layers. Okay, go ahead and select that, and we'll just call it beam group, and I'll go ahead and press enter, and now all those 3 layers are in their own separate group. Look at that. And I can click on this little arrow and that will expand the group so we can see what's inside of it. Okay, pretty cool. But the greatest thing about this is that we're going to create a layer mask on this beam group right here. So let's go ahead down here to the bottom of the layers palette and click on the add layer mask, and that'll place the mask right next to the group folder. Let's come over here to the toolbar and select the gradient tool, because what we're going to do is make these beams of light fade away. I mean, fade out. They're going to come out of the house as bright as possible, and then they're just going to slowly fade out. Let's look on our completed project here. Do you see how the light just sort of fades off? It just drops off after a little while. I mean, it's pretty bright at the beginning right here, but as you go along, the light just starts to fade away. So that's the type of effect that we're going to create right now. And we're going to be doing it on this layer mask. The layer mask is white, so what we need to do is use black. Let's press D and X on the keyboard to make the foreground color black. I'm going to hold down Shift and then bring that gradient crosshair just outside of the image here. And I want you to click and drag in a gradient. Now, we may have to do this a few times just to get it right, but I'm going to do it right now real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. You see that? Let's go ahead and undo that. And I'm going to bring that just a little bit closer. Click and drag the gradient. I'm holding down the Shift key. Now, if I don't hold down the Shift key with the gradient tool, then it's really flexible like this. And I want to make sure that I'm going perfectly horizontal, so I'm just going to hold down the Shift, and that'll lock it in, and then I'll go ahead and release. Look at that. Now that just looks so much better than it did before. Now it's starting to look more realistic. Now what we can do is adjust the opacities of those beams to really make them look real. And let's go over to that group and expand that. And then I'll go down here and let's just tweak these opacities just a little bit, because I don't want those beams to collide too much, because they really don't need to be that bright. Let me go ahead and zoom in here just a little bit closer, because if the video is a little bit small, I'll zoom in so you can see this. Also, if you notice that the edges of the beams are very defined, it's a very sharp edge. I found that if I blur or soften those edges just a tiny bit, it looks much better. Watch, I'll click on beam 1. Better yet, I'll just make these beam 3 and beam 2 invisible. Well, let's just start with beam 3 for right now. Let's come up here to filter, down here to blur, and Gaussian blur. And this is just a very slight blur, very slight. You don't want to crank this thing all the way up here, because it's just not going to look right. You can do that, but if you want those really cool sharp beams, then you're going to have to keep that radius number way down here. Then what I'll do is just go ahead and click OK. So we're going to use the 1.2. I'm going to click OK, and so we can apply the same value to all the other beams. So I'll click on beam 2, go up here to filter, Gaussian blur, and you'll see that the Gaussian blur is the first thing on the menu here at the very top, and all we have to do is select that, and that'll apply the exact same setting that we used the last time we used the Gaussian blur. So I'll click on beam 1, make that visible, go up to filter, Gaussian blur right here. Great. And that very subtle adjustment there, I feel that just makes a big difference. So let's check it out. Look at that. And there's one other thing that we need to do to make all this look more real than it already does. We're going to create this light on the grass. And if we look over on the completed poster, you can see the light is coming out of the house. The grass there is sort of lighting up a little bit, just because the lights are so bright that the outside of the house is getting light as well. So we're going to go ahead and create that effect right there. And before I do that, I've been looking at the image here, and I noticed that those beams could probably be just a little bit more dramatic. Let me show you something real quick. If we select or link all these beam layers together, we could actually distort them. And what I mean by that is come over here to Edit, Transform, and select Distort. And that'll give us the ability to widen the beams if we want to. We don't have to. But I can come in here and widen those up a little bit. You see, they were a little bit narrow, but I can just come over here and make those much more dramatic like that. Look at that. And then I'll go over here and just click on a little check box or a little check mark at the top, or I can press the Enter key on the keyboard to confirm that. Look at that. Okay, so I mean, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing here is kind of like freestyle. A lot of it's improvised. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. I have to experiment just like everybody else. So, but I think I like this much better. And hopefully you can pick up little tips along the way. And so now let's create that reflection off the grass there. I'm going to create a new layer, and let's call that grass light. There we go. And the grass light is pretty easy to make. All we have to do is select the brush tool and create a soft brush. So we'll right click on the image and make sure the hardness is all the way down. And I'll just set this brush size here a little bit larger. And then I'll just come in here with the paintbrush and I'll paint down like this. Now that looks pretty wild. I'm just going to go ahead and make that brush size just a little bit smaller. And I'm going to experiment. I mean, I don't really know if this brush size is going to work for me, but I want to cover the grass. I mean, you almost have to imagine the light beams are, or the grass is picking up the brightness of the beams. That's really what's happening here. And they're not going to be this bright, obviously. I mean, we're going to go back and adjust the brightness of it. I can use the eraser and also come back in here and trim that lighting a little bit, just like that. All right, now let's go over to the grass light layer and turn down the opacity. Look at that. And that's how we can get that effect. Now what we can do, we can also come up here to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we can blur that as well. Whiting it, it's making it a little bit whiter, but we can blur the paint if, because if we can't get the brush soft enough, then we can just go ahead and blur it later or after we've painted the light down there. Okay, excellent. There you go. Now we have that reflection. And I can also see it looks like the mountain in the back there is just a little bit bright. I'm going to hold down Control and select the layer mask of this house, select the transparency of that. And what I think I'll do is inverse that selection. Click on the house layer. Let's select levels. And then I'll just darken that background just a little bit more, just so we could barely see the mountain there. There. And let's go ahead and zoom out and look at our work. That's looking pretty hot. Yeah, it looks like the top there, the sky at the very top, is still a little bit bright. So I'm going to go ahead and just double click on the levels for that image adjustment and make that just a little bit darker, just so it'll blend in more with the house, because it looks like it's just a little bit too bright for nighttime. Great. Okay, so what can we do next? Well, we can add some text, or we can add in the eyeball. Let's go over to the Adobe Bridge, and let's go ahead and open up this image of this eye. I'll go ahead and double click on that, and let's get that into Photoshop. All right, great. Let's go ahead and up here to Select and Select All, and then over here to Edit, down here to Copy, and then I'll just go ahead and close this eye image. And next what I'll do is click on the topmost layer, and then I'll come over here to Edit and Paste, and I'll just position that where I think I like it. All I have to do is create a layer mask on that layer, and I'll just name that for right now, eye, and then I'll click on that layer mask, then I'll select the brush tool, and I'll make a good size brush here, about 800 pixels or so, and then I'll just come in here and paint on that mask to make that eye just make it look like it's just appearing in the middle of the night. All right, then what I'll do is probably make an adjustment layer for this layer here. So I'll hold down Alt, make a new adjustment layer, and let's use levels again. And then I'll move this white slider, the white arrow here, over to the left to make that darker. Look at that. And I can adjust these brightness controls as well. There we go. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. And it looks like to me I could probably do a little bit better job on that masking. So I'm going to turn up the brush here. Then I'm just going to darken the edges of that just a little bit more, just like that. All right, so it's looking pretty good. Now for the next step, we're going to create a photo filter. And this is going to help us adjust the color and overlay a color over the entire image and make everything blend in just a little bit better. Let me go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to come right over to the Layers palette and click on the Adjustment Layer button. You don't have to hold down Alt, but what I'm going to do is select this option right here, Photo Filter. We can apply this overall warming filter to the image. Look at that. And we can use a custom color here, a custom orange color if we'd like. We have presets, warming filter presets that we can use. We can make it like a cooling filter, a warming filter. We have orange and red and all these other colors that we can use. But I think what I'm going to do for this project is just use an orange here, and I'll just brighten it up a little bit. There we go. And it just makes everything a little bit more warmer and blends everything in together. So far, let's go ahead and zoom into the image and get a little bit closer look at our work. And so we can see what we've done so far. I'm going to press the Tab key on the keyboard. And by doing that, that'll make the palettes in the toolbar disappear. And now we can zoom in and look at the image. Check this out. And I think I'll even go even larger. And this is looking pretty hot. And it still looks a little bit bright. It looks like we almost have a moon shining over on this side of the house or something like that, which is okay. You know, I could make the house darker if I wanted to, but I think, you know, we pretty much get the point here on what's going on. Then we have the eye, and then we have the sky here in the back. So let's just continue the project. If you'd like to go ahead and continue, what I'm going to do is start adding the text onto the movie poster. All right, now let's go ahead and continue and add the text onto the movie poster. So first of all, I'm going to go over here to the toolbar, click on the foreground, and change that to white, and then click OK. Then I'll select the Type tool. I'm going to click on the image, and let's type out the title of the movie, Occupants. All right, and if you look over at other movie posters, you'll notice that a lot of them are all caps, but they capitalize or they make that first letter larger than the rest of the word, and that helps it to make it look more like a main title compared to all the other text on the cover. And so there's an idea right there. I looked at a lot of movie posters before I started to create the ones for this DVD, and I picked up little tiny things like that along with a lot of other things, and I wanted to just go ahead and share those with you. So I'm going to go ahead and make the O on occupants a little bit larger. I'm going to grab the character palette, which is up here on the palette well, and I'm just going to increase the point size a little bit and just make that a little bit larger. If I click on the T right next to the drop-down menu right here, little icon, if I click, you'll see the little hand tool with a couple little arrows next to it. But if I click and drag either to the left or the right, I can resize that first letter. Look at that. And you can select individual letters or you can select the whole word. It doesn't really matter. But it's kind of a variable resize adjustment there. And it's kind of nice because you can see the difference on the fly as it's actually happening. So I'll go ahead and adjust that and then press enter as soon as I like it. And let's go ahead and zoom in just a little bit closer. And I'll go ahead and put this character palette right back up on the palette well. Okay, so you can see that I've made that first letter larger, and I can just zoom out, and we want that title to be much larger. And hold down Shift and Alt, and that'll be Shift and Option on the Mac. And then I'll just come down to the corner, click on a corner, and move the mouse, and just basically make this text larger, so it'll fit across the poster a little bit better, just like this. And now because I've made that text larger, what I'm going to do is decrease the letter spacing. Okay? Because most of the time in typography, when we make the letters larger, then sometimes we need to decrease the letter spacing. Now, when letters are smaller, then we need to make the letter spacing, or we need to increase the letter spacing. So I'm going to come over here to the character palette and just bring that over here so we can see it. And right here, you'll find the tracking, and I can just increase that, or actually decrease it, sorry, down to -25. May even go just -10, so it's not too harsh there. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to create the, and select that, and we don't need it that big, so I'm just going to go ahead and just use the drop-down menu for the point size until I like it. And I'll set you see, and here's another typography technique right here, but you can see that by using the capital or the larger O here compared to the rest of the word, when we incorporate other words, it's easier now because we can set those words into little cozy corners. I'm just going to make that letter spacing on that just a little bit larger, because you can see since it's a smaller word that now we need to increase the letter spacing. So there's a tip right there. That's looking pretty good. And then I'll go ahead and just click down here and we'll add some more text. They are watching you. I'll press enter and I'll double click on that type layer to select the entire type layer, and then I'll lower the point size down just a little bit. And I'll set this text all the way to the end. All the way to the end of the title of the movie. And it's a good idea to line things up. You can see that I'm lining that up right to the very end of that S. Because in design, you should always make sure something is aligned with something. Always. And so the more you do that, then the better your layout will look. And of course, we can add the stuff at the top. We can add some more text on the bottom. And if you see on the final poster here, we have some text down here on the side. And this is just one type layer, which is sort of like a little slogan, or not a slogan, but a little tagline for the movie, a little blurb or little hint text. The way to create that, I'll show you right now. Go ahead and select the type tool, and I'll show you how to create that text. I mean, and this is just typing. A lot of you guys already know how to create type in Photoshop, but I'm just going to go ahead and show you anyway. Let me grab the text from the other movie poster. Then what I'll do is click, and let's get that new type layer created there. And I'll go ahead and paste the text in. Now to get that to get that line spacing, this is actually the leading. Okay? And that is right here. If you hover the mouse over the icon here, it'll say set the leading. And leading, they call it leading because years ago they actually used to use real lead in between the letters, or setting the type, they would actually use real lead. And so that's why they call it leading. And it's just, I guess, stuck the whole time. So that is how I got that line spacing there. Look at that. And I'll just go ahead and get the move tool. Regarding the alignment, you can see that to make sure that you're aligning the text with other objects and other text on the image, you can come up here to view and turn rulers on. Then what that'll allow you to do is to drag out a guide. So you have some sort of guide to use to make sure that everything is aligning properly. You see that? And then you can just go ahead and turn off the guides. Under extras, you can just go to show and uncheck the guides, and that'll make that go away. Alright, so if you'd like to learn how to create movie credits, go to the movie credits video on this DVD and I'll show you how to do that. And I'll teach you how to create a credit block that is seen on the bottom of almost every movie poster ever made. And there's a few steps involved in it, so I went ahead and created a separate tutorial, separate video just for that. And go ahead and check that out. And now you know how to create movie posters in Photoshop and how to create some killer light beams coming out of the house there. So we'll see you guys on the next video. So on the building layer, let's make a layer mask. Just come down to the bottom of the layers palette here and click on the Add Layer Mask button. And what I'll do is make sure that's activated, this mask right here. And then over here on the toolbar, I'll select black for the color for the foreground. And then I'll select the paintbrush. And by the way, I don't need this image here anymore, so I'll just go ahead and close that, just so it's not as distracting. But I'll select the brush tool here, and with a nice soft brush, so we'll turn the hardness all the way down, and the master diameter somewhere in the middle, or it looks like this will be good for now. And I'll just paint on this mask. And by painting on the mask, on this layer, we are basically removing the image. We are erasing the image away, revealing the layer below this image, which contains the sky. Look at that. Now I'm getting a little bit close to these buildings here, so what I'm going to do is turn down the diameter just a touch there. And this is sort of bringing out kind of like a foggy type of effect. Look at this. And we have these trees in the background. Now, I'm not crazy about the glow. But what I can do is turn this brush up just a little bit higher. And fix some of that glow a little bit so it's just not so noticeable. Something like this. And better yet, I think I'll just paint this through. Because these trees right here were not originally there. Those are the trees from the lake image. You see that? And if I make that invisible, you can see this is the before, and this is with the clouds layer below it. So what we're going to do is use this as the background. But we're also going to fade or use a gradient and fill this top in here with black, or have it go from black to transparency down to the building, or down to these buildings down here. So let me go ahead and just make a new layer, and let's call this gradient. Then what I'll do is select the gradient tool, and up here on the options bar, let's select the second option. It's called foreground to transparent. Go ahead and click on that. And then what we can do is position this crosshair, and it's really small. You'll barely be able to see it. I'll zoom in here a little bit, and I'll move this image up. You see this, let me select it one more time. There we go. You see this little crosshair that I'm using right here? I'm going to position that at the very top of the image, and then hold down the Shift key on the keyboard and click and hold and drag down, and then release. And you can see that will fill it in and so you'll have that gradual blend. Let's go ahead and try that again. It looks like I might have to come down a little bit smaller, or I'm sorry, a little bit lower down here. There we go. And here's a tip. If you ever want to increase the gradient or make it darker, what you can do is duplicate the gradient layer. You see that? So when you do that, that'll make it darker. Now, we'll go ahead and do that if we need to later on, but for now, I'll just leave it like this. So I like the background and everything. That looks pretty hot. I'm going to go ahead and leave that. All right, I'm not too concerned about the color, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it black and white for now. Let's go into the Adobe Bridge. And let's click on this guy right here, since he's going to be the main guy of the movie. He's going to be in the front. So let's just double click and open up him in Photoshop. And I'm going to select the Move tool, click and drag him over to the project. Then we will just go ahead and close this image out right here. We no longer need that. All right, next what I'm going to want to do is convert this layer into a smart object. Now, if you don't have Photoshop CS2 or higher, then just go ahead and skip this part. But the smart objects allow us to create non-destructible layers and objects. And so, because this way later on, if we need to resize things, then we can do it without losing any quality. But just go ahead and skip this part if you don't have the newest version of Photoshop. That's okay. So I'm going to rename this layer to Man 1. And we're going to come up here to Layer, Smart Object, and group into Smart Object. And we know it's a Smart Object because we see the Smart Object icon at the bottom right of the thumbnail, right there. Great. Let's go ahead up here to Edit, Free Transform, and I'll hold down Alt and Shift. Now that's Option and Shift, and I'm only doing that so I can maintain the image's aspect ratio while I resize it down. Look at that. And if I don't hold down Alt, then then it'll allow me to resize it to one of the corners. But if I hold down Alt, then it'll resize from the center out, or out to the center. Either way. So let's resize this down and position this somewhere on the poster, preferably in the top middle area of the poster here. I'm going to go ahead and confirm this by pressing the Enter key on the keyboard. Great. Now let's just zoom into the image here and take a look at this. Well, we need to make it look like his face is just coming out of the sky. You know what I mean? So looks like he's just peeping his head or his face out of the sky. And so we need to mask all the area around him, around his head. So let's make a mask or a layer mask on this man1 layer or smart object. Come down to the bottom of the layers palette, click on this button right here, which will allow us to create a layer mask. Great. Let's make sure that's activated. Come over to the layers palette, click on the brush, and I will make this a larger brush. And then I'll bring this brush over here and start painting on the side of him, just like this. It's a lot of fun. It's really not that hard to do. And I'll just paint down here and up. And the cool thing is that we are not actually using the eraser tool and erasing away this layer. We are only using a mask. So we can come back here anytime and change the foreground color to white and bring back the areas that we removed or painted on in the mask. Look at that. And that is why I like to use layer masks, and I think everybody should. But check that out. If you want to get a better look at it, you can make these other layers invisible over here, and you can see exactly what you're doing. But the important thing is that it must look good with the background. I'm going to go ahead and make these visible. Here we go. Now, I don't want to go too crazy right now because I haven't incorporated the other people's heads into the image. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's go over to the Adobe Bridge, and let's see who's going to be next. How about this guy right here with the cool glasses on? I'll go ahead and double click him, and he's already masked and everything, as you can see. So I'll select the move tool and click and drag him over to the project. Now he's pretty big, so what I'm going to do is just drag him below man 1, and we're going to call him man 2. All right, now let's go up here to Layer, Smart Object, and group him into a smart object as well. Over here to Edit, Free Transform, and let's resize him down. Okay, it would look better if he was probably tilting out like this. So if you do have to, you can rotate things, do whatever you want here. I'm really focusing on having this type of shape. And if I'm not totally happy with the transformation right now, I can just come back and do it later because we have a smart object. But there we go. Okay, that looks really good. I don't want to get too fussy with this right now. I'm going to go ahead and press the Enter key on the keyboard. Now, let's go ahead and add some more people into the project. Back to the Adobe Bridge, and how about this guy right here? Double click on him, and I will click on the Move tool and drag him into the project, and he's a lot bigger, so we're going to come up here to, first thing, Layer, Smart Object, Group into Smart Object, and then over to Edit, Free Transform, and I will just transform him down. And I'll probably go over here to transform and flip him horizontally, just like this. And then I'll just make him over here sticking out of the ear, sort of. Keep in mind that I want the tops of their heads to be very close to the same. I want that nice composition. I want that nice even look. I don't want his head down here. I want it all to be very balanced. Balanced is the word I'm looking for. So, but check this out. This looks really good. And I'll just go ahead and I'll make it a little bit smaller, and then I'll confirm that. Great. And let's name this Man 3. There we go. Let's bring in some more. Back to the Adobe Bridge. And this girl right here. This woman right here, I will double click on that to bring her in. The Move tool, click, drag her over to the project. All right, then I'm going to go over to the Layers palette and drag her below Man 2 because she's going to be all the way in the back. She's going to be way back there. So let's name her Woman 1. And let's convert her into a smart object. group that into a smart object, and then I will come up here to Edit, Free Transform, hold down Alt and Shift, and we'll resize this down. And I'm going to rotate her a little bit so we're able to see her face there. Also keep in mind that look at the eyes, make sure the eyes are lining up very good, because then you're going to have a lot better composition as well. And so that's very important too. I'm going to rotate this. I want to go ahead and press the Enter key on the keyboard to confirm that. Great. Let's bring one more person into the project. Back on the Adobe Bridge, and this woman right here. Let's double click on her and load her into Photoshop. I'll select the Move tool, click and drag her over to the project. And let's just give her a name, Woman 2. And I can drag her below here, but it's probably not necessary. I'm going to come over here to Edit, Transform, and flip her horizontally so she's pointing this way. And let's go over here to Layer and make her a smart object as well. There we go. And then while we're at it here, we can just close these other images back here because we no longer need them. And it'd be a good time at this point to go ahead and save your image if you haven't already before we move on. All right. Now I'm going to come over here to Edit, Transform, and transform this woman down a little bit. I want to make sure that her head is the same size as this woman's head over here. And that's going to create a nice balance as well. You see that? So I'm being very picky here at all these little details, but they are going to make all the difference at the very end. Look at that. And I'll pay attention to the eyes. I want to line these eyes up all the way across. They don't have to be straight across, but they can almost have a very slight curve to them. And I want to make sure the heads are going at the same angles, just like this woman over here. And when I like it, I'll go ahead and press the Enter button. There we go. So we've merged all the people into the movie poster. So now we have to just go through and do some masking to make all this blend together so it looks like this over here. Where do we start? Well, let's go ahead and I'm going to touch up this man number 1 over here. I'll click on his layer mask, and with the paintbrush, I'm going to make a larger brush, and I'm just going to make his collar fade back into the background like this. Look at that. And I can make that a little bit larger. There we go. And let's go ahead and move over to the glasses guy over here. And so I'll click on man number 2, and I'll make this the thumbnails just a little bit larger. And by the way, the way I'm doing that is if you want the thumbnails larger in the layers palette. Most people know how to do this already, but for those of you that don't know yet, in the layers palette, if you come up to the very top right, click on this little arrow button right here and come all the way down to the very bottom. You'll find the palette options right here, and you can set how large you want the thumbnail to be. You can also set, and recently in Photoshop CS and Photoshop CS2, you can now set the thumbnails to only display the layers bounds. Is this cool or what? And so what that means is that you see how the layer looks now. It's showing the entire full size of the image, and then it shows the contents of the layer exactly where it's located. Well, if I select layer bounds, then it's just going to show the objects on those layers and not all the space that's around them. I'm going to come over to the guy with the glasses, man number 2, and then down to the bottom of the layers palette, I'm going to click on this button right here to create a new layer mask. There we go. And then over to the toolbar, let's make sure that's set to black, and then I will right click and make this brush just a little bit smaller. And I'll come in here and paint on him, making him blend in or fade out into the background, just like this. There we go. Now the lightness of his face, I'm not going to worry about that right now, but it looks like this guy's ear, man number 1, it looks like his ear is kind of running over into man 2. So let's go ahead and click on his layer mask, man 1, and we will just use the brush, and I will probably make that a little bit smaller. Back on man 1. There we go, something like that. Perfect. Okay, and let's just move on here to man number 3. Let's make a new layer mask and click on the toolbar, and then I will come in here, and we've got to fix the top of his head here because that's just not going to look right. Just want that to blend in with the background. Look at that. Okay, good. And I will fix the bottom here of his neck. And it looks like I'll just go ahead and move over to the woman number 2 over here. And I'll create a layer mask with the paintbrush. And I'll just paint in here. And I have such a habit of right-clicking, but we can also use the brackets on the keyboard to make the brush larger or smaller. Okay? And I'll just come in here and paint away. Make sure I get his neck there. There we go. Great. Let's go over to man 1, and I'm just going to paint the mask over the very top of his head just to fade that in a little bit more, like this. There we go. And let's look over at woman number 2, or woman number 1 actually. Let's make a layer mask on her layer and touch up her neck here at the very bottom. Look at that. Great. Okay, well, that looks pretty good. And that's pretty close to what we want, is what you see right here. Now, the colors don't blend in together at all. And I will be getting to that in just a moment. And I'm going to show you how to actually add a color overlay so all the images inside this poster blend in together. Go over here to the layers palette, and I want you to click on the topmost layer right here, man number 1, and let's just make a new layer on top of him. And let's just call this color overlay. And let's fill this layer in with the color that we will be using to blend everything in together. Let's come over to the toolbar and click on the foreground color right here. And then down here where you see the hex value input right here, I want you to enter in 864200. And that will give us that golden brown look or color that we need to make this look right. And then go ahead and click OK. Come over to the toolbar and select the paint bucket tool. Click on the image to fill it in completely like this. Then I want you to come over to the opacity of that layer and turn it down just a touch. 85 or 65% will be just fine. But more importantly, I want you to come over to the layer blending mode menu for that layer. Come all the way down where you'll find color right here. Go ahead and click on that, and now that will blend everything in together. And we can control the opacity so we can have a little bit of the original color and then bring in some of the new color that we've created as well. And so you can have a nice blend there, or you can just go full blast if you want to, but I like to have a little bit of the original color in there mixed in with our color overlay. Alright, so let's move on to adding the text to the movie poster. I'm going to come over to the toolbar, and I'm going to make sure my foreground color is white. I can press the D and X keys on the keyboard to do that, and then I'll select the type tool. I'll click on the image, and I'm going to type out the name of the movie, and you can type out any name you want. Mine's going to be Spanish Villa. I'll press the Enter key. Better yet, I'll double click on that type layer, and up here on the options bar, I'll set the point size for that type. Select the Move tool, and it looks like to me I could probably decrease the letter spacing, so I'll double click on that type layer again, and then go over to the Characters palette. If you don't see the Characters palette, it's located on the Windows menu, and you'll find it right here. But on the Characters palette, and I'll move this off the palette well for now. There we go. And right here, this is where you can adjust the letter spacing, which is called the tracking. You can set this to 0 and see how that looks. If it's not enough, then you can go ahead and decrease it even more. But I'm going to select the Move tool and just position the name of the movie right here underneath the people. And I'll probably go ahead and just make that a little bit larger maybe. Try that out. And that's probably too big, so I'll just decrease the point size maybe down to 40. And I'll zoom in here so we can see this a little bit closer. Now, the name of the movie is pretty bland. It's just Spanish Villa, yes. But to make this just a little bit more interesting, I'm going to take the Type tool and just select the Villa word over here and click on the foreground, and I'm going to make that red. And then click OK. Now check that out. I like that much better. And so I'll position us over here. Great. And I've noticed that if you want the title of the movie to stand out even more, then what you can do is darken the background. So I can come over to the Layers palette and click on the clouds right here. And we can just make an adjustment layer for this clouds layer. So I can hold down the Option key, which is I can hold down the Alt key, which is the Option key on the Mac, and then come down here and select Levels and put a check in this box right here. Click OK. And then I can move this black slider here just to the left or to the right. And that will make the background darker, but at the same time making the people's heads blend in better, but also making the name of the movie more prominent. It's more visible this way. And these are just all very basic things, you know. Now let's add the tagline for the movie. I'm going to go ahead and click on the topmost layer, change the foreground color to white. I'm going to click on the image, and let's just put "There is no..." Well, I can put "There is only," and I'm going off the page here, so I can just double click on that and move this over a tad. Resize this down. There is only one secret. There we go. I'll select the Move tool. And when you're doing any type of typography, you want to keep contrast in mind. There needs to be a good contrast between the title. It could be a logo. You want a good contrast between the title or the logo and the tagline. So you can see that this, we can say this Spanish villa is the logo, but we could also have the tagline, and we want a very good contrast in between the two. And so I'm going to make this smaller, and by making the tagline smaller, we've created more contrast. Look at that. Cool. Well, let's see what else we can do here. We can add a credit block. And if you would like to learn how to create credit blocks, and credit blocks are the credits that you usually see at the bottom of movie posters and DVD cases, check out the movie credits video on this DVD, and I'll show you how to do that. It'll tell you more than you wanted to know about credit blocks. And there you go. Now, most of the time on movie covers, at the very top, we have the names of the actors and actresses. So I'm going to grab some text from the other movie poster that we created and paste that into here. And you can see that there is spacing between the names here. Well, instead of creating the names of the actors on just separate type layers, you can create them all on one type layer, and that way you know everything is aligned evenly. And then all you have to do is get it where you want it, but then you can just use the space bar. You can click the cursor somewhere in the middle and press the space bar to create the spaces in between the names, just like this. And just make sure the space on this side of the name, or on this side of the first name, is very close to the same space as it is on this side. You see that? And so we're getting nice, even, and please leave some room. Don't cram it all the way up to the top. Leave some room down like this. That will increase the readability. And then at the very top here, what we can do, now we have the actors up here, we can place something else down here, like a film, or how about this? A Mark Monsiardini film. I'll go ahead and make that a little bit smaller. Better yet, I have the Universe family here somewhere. And it's right here, Universe LT, and that is the one of the credit block fonts, and I can put that right up there. And to be very official, I'll just select film and make film a little bit smaller, and make A smaller. So I'll select the Move tool and position that, and there we have it. And I'll zoom out, and then we will create our credit block and drag the credit block over to the poster to make it complete. And if the credit block is not visible enough on the bottom, and it's very important that this is readable, I'll make a new layer just above the gradient layer right here. And by the way, I'll go ahead and put this character palette back in the palette well. There we go. I'll make a new layer and I'll call this bottom shadow. And then I'll select the brush tool with a nice large brush, and I'll select black. I'll turn down the opacity to 50%. I'll zoom out, and I'll just paint on the bottom of this poster like so, and that will darken it just a tad so the credit block is more readable. Look at that. Spanish Villa coming soon. All right. So there you have it. That's how we can create a movie poster in Photoshop. And we do have another tutorial, another video on creating movie poster number 2, which I show how to create light beams coming out of a haunted house or something like that. So go ahead and check out that video. And I hope you guys got a lot out of this, and we'll see you on the next one.